Hello, I'm Rachel Laidler, Project Editor at DK Eyewitness.
And I'm Alex Pathé, Editor at DK Eyewitness.
And welcome to Where to Go, where every fortnight we find out more about the world's favourite travel destinations with the people who know those places best.
Hello Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, thanks. I'm very excited to be chatting all things travel with yet another fantastic guest. Where are we off to this week?
Well, it's a particularly exciting week this week, Rachel, because we're heading off to explore Mexico City. And you and I have both spent quite a bit of time, at least in a kind of imaginative sense, exploring Mexico, because we've been working together on Viva Mexico, which is our brand new book celebrating the country's incredible history and culture.
We did indeed. And it was such a great project to work on. I think it really brought home to me how diverse Mexico is, both in terms of the culture, of course, but also in terms of the geography as well.
Sure.
And I mean, we all know that Mexico's got really beautiful beaches, but I never thought of it as having like these massive soaring mountains and volcanoes and these sweeping deserts as well. Like learning about that, it really blew my mind.
Oh, me too. Absolutely. Just the sheer size of the country. But I think for me, I mean, I've always loved Mexican food. But it was discovering the incredible complexity of the country's cuisine that amazed me. Because we always think of like tacos and burritos, but actually the heritage and diversity of the country's cuisine is incredible. So I think this is going to be a really great opportunity to explore Mexico City with our guest, Cristina Alonso.
Today's guest is travel and food writer Cristina Alonso, whose writing has appeared in the likes of Travel and Leisure and Time Out New York. Cristina has worked as editor-in-chief of Aeromexico's in-flight magazines, and her first book, Art and Fiesta in Mexico City, was published in 2020. Welcome, Cristina. It's really lovely to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely intro. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you on the show, Cristina. So, as usual, we'll start by learning a little bit more about our guest, Cristina, followed by her all-important recommendations of where to go and insider knowledge of Mexico City. Then we'll hear about how to plan the best possible visit.
So, Cristina, you've lived in Madrid and New York, two very cool cities, I must say, but you've now returned to live in Mexico City, which is your hometown. So tell us a little bit about what brought you back.
Very cool cities, indeed. So, strictly speaking, I came back from New York because I got a job offer.
Nice.
And it all happened very quickly. I was offered a job as a staff writer at Travel and Leisure Mexico. And it was literally a dream for me to work at Travel and Leisure. And at the time, I was in New York with a student visa, and it was about to expire. So the timing was right.
Nice.
And then it happened really insanely. At the time they gave me the job offer, I said yes. And 3 weeks later, I was sitting at a desk in Mexico City.
Wow.
So
That's a quick turnaround. That's brilliant.
it was very, very quick. Luckily, the roommate I was living with at the time was a very good friend of mine, so she understood. And, you know, that's how a lot of the times things work in New York, where people move and come and go very quickly. But I was sad to leave New York, of course, because I was very happy there. It's an incredible city, and I loved living there. But at the same time, I always knew I was going to come back to Mexico City. I was born and raised here, and as you know, it's just such an amazing time for the city. It's undergoing such an incredible transformation. It's just thriving, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it, especially as a writer, as a journalist. I wanted to just communicate what was happening here. I wanted to be a part of it. So as weird and as just hectic as the decision of coming back was, it was also an easy decision to take.
That's fantastic. I suppose a huge part of those changes you've mentioned, Cristina, in the city is this kind of rebounding of tourism following the pandemic. It just seems like Mexico City is never far from news headlines and people are just falling in love with the place. Do you think you could kind of sum up what people love about Mexico City so much?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a cliche to say that it's a city that has everything, but I think it's true. I mean, you have the history. It's a city that has been around for centuries. And I think this is especially clear when you go downtown, where you have just ruins of a pre-Hispanic temple next to a cathedral that was born during the Spanish conquest. And then you have contemporary buildings all happening within blocks. So that gives you a really good sense of how just diverse the city is in terms of culture. You have, I believe, more than 140 museums. So culturally, it's an incredible place.
That's amazing. That's so many.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so many. I have to say, I haven't been to all of them. I it's one of my to-do lists to visit them all at some point. But there is truly a museum for everybody. You also have restaurants, obviously, that range from the finest of fine dining to really creative contemporary stuff. You have street food at literally every corner. And I think most of all, it just comes down to the people. The people in Mexico City are really warm, really hospitable. It's a really easy city to feel at home at, even though it's so big and so chaotic at times. It's just really friendly. And I think that's a common denominator for everybody who comes here. I think obviously a lot of people might feel overwhelmed because it's just massive, but I think everybody feels welcome and they feel like even if some of the people they encounter don't speak English or the language that they come from, is, they feel a connection and they feel welcome and they feel embraced. So I think that's a major factor in why so many people come and they come back and they come back because there's always something new to see.
It sounds amazing. It sounds such a dynamic place to live in and to visit as well. I think a lot of the time when people think of Mexico to begin with, it's more the beaches and the resorts rather than the cities that they think about. But there's obviously, as well as Mexico City, other spots around the country that are just amazing to visit. Could you give us a little bit of a summary why you think both visitors and locals like the country so much as well?
I think the country itself, I mean, it's geographically, it's big and diverse. And you also have everything you could think of in terms of experiences. As you said, you have the gorgeous beaches, which are as they deserve to be. They're very famous and very popular because you have the beautiful resorts. You also have the smaller beaches that are really lovely and low key. But we also have, jungles. We have deserts. We have colonial towns, which are really charming and really beautiful, full of history. And as I just said, Mexico City, which is really cosmopolitan. We also have cities like Guadalajara, which is really also thriving in terms of culture, design, in terms of food. It's also a fantastic place to visit. It's the birthplace of tequila. Cities like Oaxaca, which is fantastic. Oaxaca, I think, is also a culinary capital, probably, in my opinion, the best place to eat in Mexico. So it's just such a wonderful country where you can travel from one state to another and it changes in many ways, but it also maintains that same essence, the warmth, the hospitality that I just mentioned. It's just present throughout. And I think that's just something that keeps travelers coming back, and us as domestic travelers, it's the same thing. It's just something that makes us really proud, and it's something that is really beautiful to see as a Mexican when you go from one place to another. I think it's something really beautiful to represent.
That's incredible. It's almost, in terms of its geography, it's almost like a small continent rather than a single country, isn't it? It's just so huge. You could almost spend your life traveling around Mexico and you'd never exhaust its wonders. It's amazing.
Exactly. I just had somebody tell me, and I thought that was really lovely, that when you look at, the map of the world, it's really easy to point out Mexico because it has like such a distinctive shape. And I thought that was so beautiful. And it's true, like you have the Baja Peninsula and then all the way to the Yucatan. And I think that says something about just how unique the country is. And you're right, it's like a continent on itself, and it just has so much to offer as you explore it.
Yeah. And being right in between North America and Central America, you've got this great kind of bridge and this fusion of two very, very different regions of the world. It's that's amazing.
Yeah, and also something that's very cool. And I think once you come here and you start exploring, you get to see that part where, as you go north, you obviously have this influence from the US, and you have people use a lot of English words and expressions. And when you go south, you have all of the Maya culture that is still very much alive, and
Yeah.
that is also present in places like Guatemala and Belize. So it's like you said, it's exactly that. It's very much a bridge between North and Central and South America. So that is truly fascinating.
Okay, so to really kick things off, we're going to ask you to give us a quick fire tour of Mexico City. We're going to name a few categories and you have to suggest just one thing to do in each of these categories. So the first category is your favorite view.
All right. I would say the monument to the revolution, Monumento a la Revolución. This is a really iconic monument. It's in downtown Mexico City. But not a lot of people know that you can actually go inside the structures. It's really unique because it was
wow.
actually meant to be like a capital kind of thing, model after the US Capitol, but they started building it during the revolution, so construction stopped.
Right.
So that's why it never really came to be the grand building that it was meant to be. It became something else entirely. So you can go inside, and inside the structures, there's a museum that tells the story. And then as you go up, they have these terraces and this lookout almost at the top. I think the highest point is like 52 meters. So
Nice.
you
Okay.
get a 360 view of the city. It's really beautiful. And one thing that's really cool, I think it happens once a month. They do like a sunrise tour.
Oh, nice.
So you go like at 6 a.m., they give you coffee and you watch the sunrise over the city. It's really stunning. So I would say that's my favorite view.
That sounds amazing. Is it like a tour in the fact that they point different kind of like things out to you on the horizon, or do they tell you a bit more about the history of the place?
Yeah, they tell you more about the history and the way it sort of changed purposes throughout its construction. And you can see it's really impressive. You can see like the whole steel, and I might be making up the steel, I don't know, but they tell you about all the materials they used. It's a really imposing structure that you can see from the inside. And then once you're up, it's very cool because if you're a local, you recognize like, oh, there's that building, there's that building.
Amazing.
And it's a really, really full view of the city from up there.
That sounds so neat. Definitely gonna add that to my list when I go to visit.
Yes, it's worth the waking up early.
Yeah. So next thing that we are moving on to is favorite thing to eat, and I realize that is a big ask to narrow it down to one thing, but have a go.
That is really hard, but I would say breakfast at this restaurant called El Cardenal. El Cardenal is a really iconic restaurant. It's family run. Right now, I think they have 5 or 6 locations across the city. But the original one is also downtown. And it's a great starting point if you want to explore downtown Mexico City. It's in this old restored mansion. It's really, really beautiful. And they serve these very traditional Mexican breakfasts, really hearty, like enchiladas. They serve eggs in a clay pot,
Amazing.
bathed in salsa with cheese. It's incredible. And they make this hot chocolate that they prepare at the table. And it's very foamy, very rich. And they bring you a tray of pastries that they bake in-house.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, it's amazing. I think that, obviously Mexican food is fantastic, but I think that one of the things that Mexico does better than many countries is breakfast. So So I think just starting your day in that way is just, it fills you with energy and joy, and it's just so lovely.
I love that as well, that you're like filling up, you're getting a really hearty breakfast, and then you're in the perfect place to start exploring the city as well. That's such a great tip.
Exactly. Then you're just good to go for many hours.
That sounds amazing. And we've got so many more questions for you about things to eat, which we might get onto a bit later. But for now, the next round is your favorite thing to drink. Another really hard task when you're talking about Mexico. But if you had to pick one thing.
Really hard. I would say mezcal, just basically anywhere
Yeah.
wherever they have mezcal, I'll take it. But there's
Yeah.
a very cool bar that I like. It's relatively new. Perhaps it has 2 years. It's called Tlecan, and it's in
Okay.
Colonia Roma, and it's kind of dark inside. It has a very cool vibe. The decor is, I would say, inspired in like pre-Hispanic aesthetic. It has like a sort of pre-Hispanic stone at the end, and they have little figurines here and there. It sounds kind of kitschy, but it's not. It's very cool, and it's all focused on mezcal. They take their drinks very seriously, so you can have either the mezcal neat, or you can also have cocktails that are very cleverly prepared. They have this martini that's made with mezcal infused with vanilla. That's
Oh,
incredible.
wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that would be in terms of alcoholic drinks. And I also think Mexico has great coffee shops. So
Yeah.
in terms of coffee, I really like a coffee shop called Quentin that also has like 3 or 4 locations around the city. And that's somewhere that I sometimes like to go sit down, work, do some people watching, have some iced
Nice.
coffee. Also a favorite of mine.
Well, it's funny. It's hit 4:30 here in the UK, and I'm needing a bit of a pick me up. So I'm wishing that I was there right now to get one of those amazing coffees. Just give me a little boost.
I could go mezcal martini. That sounds incredible.
Exactly.
I've never heard of that
First the
before.
coffee,
your
then the
right
mezcal
time.
martini.
Yeah.
Right time for both.
Okay, so moving on, we want you to list your favorite day activity.
Okay. Day activity, I would say to spend the day in Coyoacán. Coyoacán is this really beautiful neighborhood in the southern part of the city. It kind of feels like you're not even in the city anymore. If you go to the right in the center of Coyoacán, it has this beautiful cobblestone streets, and it has a square with fountains and very old school houses and buildings. And it feels very quaint, very charming. And it's a great place to spend a Saturday or Sunday. I mean, you can obviously go in the middle of the week too, but I like doing that on a weekend because it definitely takes you out of the craziness of the city that's needed sometimes. So you can spend the whole day there. Coyoacan is where the Frida Kahlo Museum is. So that's obviously a very popular destination in terms of culture. And they also have a really cool market that I love where you can get everything from, fruits and vegetables. You can also get trinkets and arts and crafts and like new agey candles and oils to
Cool.
attract love and whatnot.
Nice.
And at the market, they also have this really famous tostada corner.
Nice.
It's more like a 10 stalls at this point. It's gotten pretty big, but they're very famous for their tostadas, and you can top them with everything from chicken to tuna to cochinita. They're really good for lunch. And then you can just go back to the square, walk around, have some drinks, have lunch. So it's just like a full day strolling around experience, and it's very rooted in Mexican tradition, very iconic for Mexico City, and it's a lovely area. So that I think that would be just a perfect Mexico City day.
That sounds beautiful. Is it on every day, the market, or is it only on certain days?
The market, I'm pretty sure it's open every day.
Nice. It must be really important in a city of this size to have areas that you know where you can go to have a little bit of quiet, because they're like this, what, the population is like 22 million people or something. I mean, it's huge. I didn't
It's
realize
huge.
quite how big it is.
It's over half the population of Mexico, I think. Is that right? In Mexico City itself,
It's around a quarter, I think. Yeah.
a quarter. Okay,
Yeah, it's a great concentration for sure.
that's amazing. Yeah, wow.
Incredible. Thank you so much. So the final round of the quickfire tour is, and we've touched on this already, just the sheer number of museums and galleries. But if you had to pick one of your favourite museum or gallery, which would you pick?
I would say my favorite is MUNAL, so that's Museo Nacional de Arte, the National Art Museum. That is also downtown. And just to begin with, the building is absolutely stunning. That building was at some point, I think, the Palace of Communication.
Right.
And then about 100 years ago, it became a museum. It was given to the city, to the public as a museum. And today it holds very classical art. A lot of national Mexican artists are on display there. And they have this beautiful collection of portraits, landscapes. So it's a great way to get acquainted with some of the best artists that Mexico has had, and to get a sense of just classical Mexican art. And they also have really great temporary exhibits. They had a Monet exhibit a couple of years ago that was really popular. And it's also such a beautiful building to explore. They have these really iconic stairwells that go around doing hand gestures, which the audience cannot see, but it's just a really, really beautiful building to just walk around. And in terms of architecture, it's stunning. So I like to go back every once in a while and just walk around. And it's actually next to El Cardenal, so you can go have your breakfast, then go to the museum and just have a great day downtown.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. I like it when you go into a museum as well and the building itself is just as beautiful as the artworks within it. It's always just like, it's a little extra kind of bonus tick there. So we've talked a little bit about some of the highlights in the city, but what are some that you would flag up that you wouldn't miss?
So I think, well, the easiest way is to divide the highlights sort of by area, because as we've said, it's such a big city that it can be a little overwhelming just to see a map and be like, how am I even going to tackle this? So I would say, starting by downtown. If you're downtown, you have to see the Zócalo, which is the main square. Just seeing the main square is very, very impressive. That's where the Palace of Government is. That's where the current president lives. And as I mentioned before, that's where we have Templo Mayor, which is pre-Hispanic ruins, and you have the cathedral next to it. So it's just a lot of history happening right there before your eyes. And downtown, you also have a lot of museums. You have the Palace of Fine Arts, which is this very iconic Art Deco building that it's in a lot of just Mexico City advertisements and content. I think it's one of the buildings that a lot of people identify with Mexico City. And you also have a museum in there, and you can catch performances. You can see the ballet, you can see the opera there from time to time. It's really beautiful. And just downtown is, I think, a very good way to catch the beating heart of the city. And walking around, it's mandatory. It can be a little overwhelming, but in the very best sense of the word. And then if you start heading out a little, there's also a very beautiful neighborhood called Polanco, which is where many of the luxury high-end hotels are. So a lot of people might be there just to begin with. Polanco has also very cool museums. You have the Jumex Museum, which is contemporary art. And Polanco has very high-end boutiques most of them are in this very famous avenue called Masaryk. So it's great for shopping. If you want to spend the day just treating yourself to shopping or even window shopping. And
Nice.
also great restaurants. Polanco is home to very trendy spots and some of the most famous fine dining restaurants in the city, like Pujol, Quintonil, they're in Polanco. So it's definitely a place to hang out at if you want to be, in the best of the best in many ways. I also think that you can't miss Chapultepec, which is Mexico City's biggest park. We call it like the lungs of the city. And,
Right.
like you just said, it's a good way to get a breather, get a little bit of relaxation from the bustle of the city. You can walk around Chapultepec, just hang out among the trees, and there's also a bunch of great museums spread across the park. So you have the Museum of Modern Art, the Tamayo Museum, which is also modern and contemporary art, the Museum of Anthropology, which I believe is the most visited museum in the country,
Wow.
and Chapultepec Castle, which is actually a castle. It's on top of a hill, and it has also a museum inside, and it gives you beautiful views of the city. And of course, you have neighborhoods like Roma and Condesa, which are the trendiest parts of the city at this moment. That's where a lot of the most interesting things in terms of food and drink are happening right now. You have really cool restaurants, bars, coffee shops. So it just takes walking around to bump into a bunch of options, whether you found them online or you're just walking around and you spot a thing or two you want to try. And they're
Yeah.
super fun for people watching. You also have really cool modern art galleries, very cool concept stores and designer stores. So Roma and Condesa are great for just hanging out, eating, drinking, bars, of course. They're definitely, places for hanging out and catching like the more modern contemporary side of the city.
Yeah.
And I would also say head south and, like I said, spend a day in Coyoacan, get a sense of the more like whimsical Mexico City. And there's also a neighborhood in the southern part that's called San Angel that is also super charming, very, very historic, has also like lovely large houses. It's where people actually have their country homes at some point because it was so far out that it wasn't a part of the city. And
Right.
San Angel also has a very iconic restaurant called San Angelin. That's kind of like a courtyard where you have Mexican food and it has excellent margaritas. So you can also head out there and just hang out and have a very relaxed, spread out meal. So yeah, I think those are all experiences that are not to be missed. Maybe you need a month to do them all.
They all sound incredible, though. It sounds as though there's such variety within the city. You've got those little pockets of tranquility, and then you can immerse yourself in like the art, the culture, the food. It just sounds great.
You did such an admirable job of distilling the city down to its respective
Definitely.
parts. I've realized if
Thank you.
someone asked me to do that with London, I wouldn't even know where to start. So that was fantastic. I'm really looking forward to asking this one because we know you're a big foodie. So we've touched on it a little bit already, but are there any other food and drink highlights that visitors should add to their itinerary?
Yes, well, there are so many. I would start with recommending people to visit a market because markets are so essential to the Mexican food culture. Markets have been around for literally centuries. Obviously, they've changed a lot, but I would say visit the Mercado San Juan, which is like a
Okay.
foodie paradise. You have very fresh ingredients that come in every day. So you can take a guided tour, which can be really fun, or you can just walk around on your
Nice.
own. And then you can see really fresh fish. You can see charcuterie and cheeses that they bring from Europe. And you can just sit at many of the stalls and eat there. There's one of my favorites, it's called La Jersey, and they have this incredible tapas and sandwiches from Spain, with chorizo and ham, and they give you little glasses of wine. It's great. There's also a very cool stall called Cabo San Juan that has seafood, and you can just sit there and have ceviche and tostadas and all sorts of great stuff. Or you can just walk around, sample a few things. But I think in terms of food diversity, it's a really cool experience to have.
For sure.
For just really classic Mexican food, I would go to Nikos, which is in a neighborhood that's a little far from the usually visited neighborhoods, but it's definitely worth a visit. Nikos has been around for like 60 years, and they really focus on traditional recipes. They're part of the slow food movement, and they're really careful
Nice.
about the suppliers they work with. And the chef and his mother run the restaurant. You always see them there, and it's a beautiful experience. A lot of the food they serve, they make it table side, so you can have like your coffee, your Caesar salad, your guacamole prepared table side. It's just a beautiful
Amazing.
experience. And
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
yeah, it's really worth a visit. You have to probably make a reservation a couple of weeks in advance.
I love that though, getting to see your food being made in front of you and knowing that the ingredients are coming from like locally sourced places. And yeah, it just sounds brilliant.
Yes, it's such a nice environment too, because you see just families and couples and visitors. It's like a really, democratic environment where everybody's there for the food. So that's really, really one of my top recommendations.
Perfect.
And of course, you have to go to a cantina if you come to Mexico City.
Of course.
There are plenty of cantinas across the city, but I think some of the most iconic are downtown. A couple of them are La Ópera, Salón Tenampa, Salón Tenampa is just like a party. There are bands playing all the time. It's a really festive place, and you can have just a very good sense of the festive side of downtown. You have very traditional dishes to share. You order a bottle of tequila and you can just stay there and hang out all night if you want to. And there are some other more low-key cantinas where you can just have a few dishes and a few drinks. Then I would say is more of an iconic destination in terms of celebratory experience. I also like one called Covadonga that is in Roma, that they don't have as much of the mariachi live music experience. That's
Right.
a little quieter if if you prefer. Some people, I have to make that side note. Some people think the nampa is too loud. I think it's really fun, but I do have to say, some people say the nampa might be too musical. But cantinas are super fun. I think you just have to experience that side of the Mexican nightlife. And you also have a lot of obviously very cool restaurants that have sprouted out over the past few years that are very creative and that give you a good idea of how we have this very cool new generation of chefs. And I love places like Meroma in Roma that has like a farm to table concept. It's run by a husband and wife team, and you can also see them there all the time. The menu changes frequently, and it's really fresh, really beautiful. I also like a place that I visited recently that is also in Condesa, I think. It's called Plonk, and they do like Asian inspired dishes with a very well curated wine list. So, I mean, there are tons of places, but I think these two can give you a good sense of the like more modern dining scene.
Yeah.
I love that because I think that like in Mexico, it's obviously got such a kind of rich foodie heritage to draw on already. But then it just sounds so interesting to hear that, yeah, you've got new chefs playing around with ingredients, traditional ingredients, and doing something a little bit different with them.
Yeah, exactly. That I think that's something really, really fascinating because you have the tradition that has always been around, but then you also have all this creativity that is really bubbling. And it's really, really
Nice.
fun to see and to keep trying new things.
Sounds fantastic.
And you know, of course, you have all the great places that have been around for, 10, 15 years, like Pujol, Rosetta, Contramar, that when you Google Mexico City restaurants, these are the first places that will come up.
Yeah.
Quintonil, and they're fantastic, and you should definitely try them. They're classics at this point for a reason. You definitely have to book them pretty much when you book your flight because they're
Get them early.
exactly. But yeah, they are all, I think, the places that represent the Mexico City, like fine dining, new dining scene the best at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lastly, I would also mention a few bars too. I think we also have a fantastic bar scene. Places like Limantur, which is also an icon at this point. I really like a place called Brujas that is all run by women, and they are inspired by like Mexican herbal medicine. And
Wow.
yeah,
Incredible.
their cocktails are very unique, and all their drinks are inspired by like Mexican iconic women, and they make really interesting drinks. Yes. So I hope I didn't overwhelm you with my recommendations, but I just think eating in Mexico is just the best experience.
They're
So
just, honestly, it sounds absolutely incredible. I feel so hungry now, and I definitely want one of those herbal cocktails. They sound really
Yeah.
fantastic. Are there any hidden gems then in the city that you'd recommend to visitors that they shouldn't miss?
yes, so I recently discovered a couple of spots. One of them is called Malish, so it's Malix. And it's actually in Polanco, where you usually have more, I would say, high-end spots. Malish is a beautiful place. The decor is gorgeous, and the chef there, what he's doing is inspired by the concept of like Mexican heritage combined with other cultures. So he experiments a lot with ingredients. He also works with local suppliers, but his cuisine is very, very unique. It could be weird, but it's really unique. He works with very interesting combinations, but the results are incredible. And there's also a place called Tencui that the main ingredient in everything is mushrooms.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Yeah, it could also sound weird, but it's fantastic. They use mushrooms in cocktails, in desserts, in the main dishes, and it's incredible.
That sounds so cool.
It
Amazing.
is, and they grow the mushrooms, a lot of them, right in the restaurant. They have this chamber. You can go upstairs and see the mushrooms.
That's such a brilliant concept. I really
That's
like
really
that.
cool and very, very much locally sourced as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I really love those two spots, and the people behind them are very creative, very committed to what they're doing. So I would definitely recommend people to check them out.
Sounds fantastic.
That was just brilliant, Christina. Thank you so much. I feel like we got the tour we really needed. That was excellent.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
There's so much to love about Mexico. Indigenous traditions stretching back millennia, colourful cuisine that's loved the world over, and vibrant festivals bursting with joyful energy. It's a country worth celebrating, and that's exactly what our brand new book, Viva Mexico, is all about. You can pre-order online now. So, Christina, I'm sure anyone listening to this is now going to be clamouring to visit Mexico City. So could you give our listeners any advice on the best time of year to visit?
Of course. Well, the city has pretty mild weather year round. So my only advice would be, if you don't particularly like rain, consider that the rainy season starts in May, late May, and it ends in August. So it might make it harder to walk around. Driving or catching a cab in that season might be a little annoying. Other than that, I think it's a
Right.
great city to visit throughout the year.
Amazing. I think as well, if it's any British folk going over, we're used to rain
That's
as well.
an excellent point.
Always getting rained on, so hopefully that won't put people off.
Yeah, you're probably like, well, that's a little rain. That's fine.
Yeah. Are there any events, though, as well, that kind of mark the calendar in Mexico City that our listeners should be aware of that they could maybe plan their visit around?
Yeah, in the fall, there are two very fun times to come. So one would be Independence Day, which is September 16th. That's very fun because around that time, pretty much during the whole month of September, there are a lot of very festive events. A lot of places have special menus or special decor, just very patriotic. So you can find parties, you can find the whole city with flags, and that's always a good time to visit. And then at the beginning of November, we have Dia de Muertos, which is a very popular time to be in the city.
Cool.
I really love that because you have a lot of altars that people put up to celebrate their dearly beloved who have passed on. So that's a really beautiful celebration across Mexico, where we, more than thinking of death, we celebrate life. So you put up the altars. You have these beautiful marigolds all over, and on the very day of the celebration, there are parades. But you also have, similarly to Independence Day, you have many places doing special menus or special cocktails. You may find parties, and it's just a special time to be in the city. Of course, both times I would suggest people make their hotel reservations and everything in advance, because it can get a little crowded, but I think they're very, very cool times to be here.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. And at the close of the show, we always like to ask our guests if you could have any advice on what travellers can do to make a positive impact when they visit the city.
Yes, definitely. I think there are two important issues. Mexico City right now is dealing with a water crisis. So I think definitely be mindful of your water consumption when you're here, and try to consume water responsibly. Obviously, if you can, bring your own water bottle, reuse it. Don't buy a bunch of water bottles, which applies to anywhere, I think.
Of course, yeah.
And also, I think it's always important to be mindful and considerate with the people in the service industry. Like I said right at the beginning, people here are super hospitable and warm. But I also think it's always important to remember that not everybody speaks English, and they try really hard to accommodate visitors. But I think it's also really nice to just, learn a few phrases in Spanish. People will always appreciate that. Be nice with your tips. A lot of people don't have a very high salary, so they live off tips, and that's always greatly appreciated. And lastly, I think be very considerate when you're buying crafts as souvenirs, because people who do that, a lot of them, it's all they do, and they have been doing that for generations. A lot of people, have learned to weave or make pottery from their parents or their grandparents, and it's actually a very important thing to do. And just pay them fairly. Don't try to buy the cheapest souvenir. Just consider that it's actually the way they make their living. So pay a fair price. I think that's also a very important thing to consider, and just leave a positive impact with the people.
That's such a great tip. And it's, it's incredible the amount of kind of like heritage and tradition and craft that is going into these items as well. So it makes complete sense that you should pay good money for them as well.
Exactly. And they're just so beautiful. I mean, if you take the time to just see the detail and the amount of time that goes into each of them, I think they're worth, paying a fair price for.
Definitely.
That's everything. Cristina, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
That was such an interesting chat with Cristina. I loved all of her recommendations for places to eat and drink in Mexico City, especially the place with the herbal-inspired cocktails. I think I'm definitely going to check that out when I go to Mexico City. If you want to find more of Cristina's work, check out her website, cristinaalonso.net, or her Instagram, @soycristina.
Wasn't that an excellent episode? I mean, I didn't realise quite how difficult it was to condense the whole of Mexico City into this very short format, but Cristina did a fantastic job, and I'm so excited about that mezcal bar she mentioned. That sounded incredible. So on the next episode, we're going to be heading to the Caribbean, which should be another really, really great adventure. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
This podcast was produced by Julia Baker and me, Bella Talbot. For more information about DKI Witness, visit dk.com/travel and follow us on social media @DKI Witness. Please rate, review and follow the show. Your support means so much to us.